who's introducing Amy?
We're going to wait 5 minutes because people just.
Oh, okay.
That's what.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's why. That's why.
Okay,
But
I can't.
I will introduce her, and Cindy will be talking. We're good. We're good. We're good. We're good. She's not on her own, I promise. She's not on her own. But generally, and usually Minion doesn't. Here we go. See? Exactly. Usually Minion doesn't.
This one is the back.
They're both about.
Testing. Okay.
They both are.
Good.
Okay. I know people are still coming in, but I do want to be respectful. So I think we're going to get started, okay? And they'll dribble in. So just so you're aware, there is a live stream over there if you want to look, and there's also people who stayed on after the Minion on Zoom. So you've got fully multi-technology. Okay, good evening. It's my pleasure to welcome you this evening and to take a moment to thank all of you who have sponsored this wonderful author series of our very own AWE, Authors on Weekday Evenings. Your support makes it possible for us to invite these renowned authors to our community. Tonight, we welcome Amy Blumenfeld, an award-winning author and journalist who grew up in Queens, New York, a graduate of Barnard College and the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. She received the James A. Wexler Award for National Reporting. Her work has appeared in numerous publications, including the New York Times, the Huffington Post, O, the Oprah magazine, Hadassah, and Moment, as well as on the cover of People. She also worked as a staff editor and writer at George magazine. Some of you may have met Amy when she was here with her fellow contributors to the USA Today best-selling anthology On Being Jewish Now. Her debut novel, The Cast, was selected as a New York Post Best Book of the Week and named winner of the Independent Publisher Book Award in Popular Fiction. Her second novel, which she will be discussing today, Such Good People, is an emotionally gripping, character-driven story about lifelong friendship, loyalty, and the ripple effect of a single split-second decision. The book was named the People magazine Most Anticipated Book of 2025 and a Forbes magazine Pick of 2025. We are delighted that Amy and her family are neighbors. They reside in Port Washington. I now turn the mic over to Amy and Cindy for what I am certain will be a thought-provoking discussion about such good people.
So my name is Cindy. Nice to meet you again, Amy, and to welcome you to our Kehila Kadosha. And we're so glad to have you here. And before we dive into the questions, and especially for those joining us this evening who haven't yet had a chance to read this book, which I highly recommend, would you be willing to offer a brief synopsis of the story in your own words and share what first drew you to tell it?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's really lovely to be here and see so many familiar faces. Can you hear me?
Can
Can you hear it? No? Is that better? Okay. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. So basically, Such Good People is about two kids growing up in Midwood, Brooklyn. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that neighborhood. It's about a boy and a girl, April and Rudy, and they are best of friends. They meet on a playground when they are toddlers, and their families very quickly become the closest of friends and extended family. They grow up together, and he stays back for college. He is the son of an apartment building super in an apartment building just down this block from her home. And she goes off to a prestigious private university upstate. At the end of their freshman year, she invites him to meet up with her in Manhattan. She happens to be there for a club meeting for the weekend. She's like, please come and hang out with me. He says, no, I don't want to. You go be with your friend. She's like, please, please, please come. So he decides to come. And when he walks into this venue on the Upper West Side, he sees her in the back of this bar area with her back pressed up against a wall. There's a very inebriated man sort of hunched over her, and she looks very uncomfortable. He walks in, he tries to extricate her from this situation. One thing leads to another. There's a bar brawl. And they end up leaving, going home to Brooklyn, and the next day, Rudy is arrested in her home for the death of this man. One thing leads to another. There's an arrest. He gets sentenced to 15 years in prison. She gets expelled from college. She ends up marrying a man, moving to Chicago, having a beautiful life, and then 15 years later, while her husband is running for office in Chicago, he is released, and the headlines explode, and it impacts her marriage, her career, her children, and she is torn between the beautiful life that she has created and this best friend who gave up everything for her.
Thank you so much for that lead-in. Amy, I'd like to first focus on your personal and formative experiences. I just want to ask you, how did observing your father preside over criminal court cases influence your sense of justice, empathy, and curiosity about people's backstories? And were there moments in court that stayed with you and influenced specific scenes in the book?
So my dad, some of you here know him. That better? Okay. So I grew up with a father who, when I was very young, was a criminal defense attorney. He was the head of the Bronx office of the Legal Aid Society. And so when my brother and I were young, my dad would have his colleagues come over, and they would sit around the dining room table, and they would discuss cases. And from a very young age, I knew the lingo about fact patterns. And I actually thought legal aid was one word, legal aid. And so defense attorney, fact pattern, all of those things were just seared into my mind. And so I felt for these people that they were talking about, and I didn't know what was going on, but I felt for them. And then when I was in 7th grade, my father became a judge, and he was appointed by Mayor Koch, and he became a criminal court judge in Queens, and going to work with my dad was going to sit with him on the bench. And I would watch the body language of the prosecutors and the defense attorneys, and I would listen again to the words that they were, and I would see the defendants come out of the pens handcuffed, and they were just feet in front of me, and they would announce them as docket numbers, and I would wonder why they were numbers and not human beings. And that really bothered me. But in addition to seeing the defendants, in addition to seeing the prosecutors and the defense attorneys, the thing that really stuck with me all of these years was seeing the people in the back of the courtroom, the people in the pews. Those were the family members, and they had these angst-riddled faces, and I didn't know why. It's like, what's their story? Why are they here? Why are they crying? Why are they getting up and walking out and fiddling and moving around and seeming so nervous? And I didn't know if they were there for the side of someone on the prosecution or the side of somebody on the defense. But those faces and those people have stayed with me all of these years. And so after my book, my first novel, The Cast, I didn't want to do something that was medical related because that touched on illness, but I wanted to do something that was related to criminal justice. And I didn't know what that was going to be. And it took a while of just sort of sitting in my head. And then one day, we were invited to, one of my dad's friends was on the board of a halfway house in the city, and they invited us to a gala function fundraiser for the halfway house. We were not able to go, but we ended up getting their newsletters. And normally you'd throw out something that looks like junk mail, but I read it. And it was because I read that newsletter from the halfway house that was the source of inspiration for this book. Because in that newsletter, they were profiling teachers who, and many of them had their own personal experience being incarcerated. And so when they were released, they decided they wanted to give back and help educate some of the inmates who were now just entering society. And I was fascinated by the fact that some of these teachers actually had been incarcerated and wanted to give back. So that started the wheels turning. And so I decided to create a character who was a teacher at a halfway house, but I didn't want that main character to have the background. I wanted it to be a friend of theirs and what inspired them to do that. And that's how the whole thing just spiraled. And then I created Rudy, and it took off from there.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful. I'd like to also talk about the significance of the title. Why this book title, Such Good People, and what do you hope it makes readers question even before they start reading it? And did you consider alternate titles, and how did this one capture the book's moral questions?
The original title was The Cover Story, and then I realized there was another book that was coming out with that. So I had to quickly shift. And then I just came up with Such Good People because I didn't want any one character to be all good or all bad. I wanted, people are layered, that we all have different aspects to us, and I wanted to capture that nothing is black and white. And so I thought about, when something happens to someone, very often I feel like a common refrain is, oh no, they're such a good person. So that's so sad, that's such a good family. So that was in my head, and bad things happen to good people. Good people can do bad things. It's like, bad people can do nice things. I just wanted people to be able to wrestle with the issues, and I tend to like books that deal with complicated things that really make you think. Beach read, vacation, easy reads, but are really thought-provoking, and I was hoping to get to that, and I thought the title might capture that.
And I just want to say that while I was reading it, I kept asking myself, why is she calling it this? And then there were various times in which you used the phrase at different points, and then it clicked in my head, and it was beautiful the way you brought that in. But I kept asking myself, why is she calling it that? Why is she calling it that?
There were a couple of characters. I think one of my favorite characters, for those who have read it, is this Keith. It's the brother of the deceased, of that inebriated man. And there are a lot of, as I said, there are a lot of questionable things that happen in the book. And so at one point, not to ruin this, but he is silent. He knows that his mother has done something questionable after the death of his brother. And yet, he wrestles with this, but he chooses not to stand up, because if he went public with what he knew was the truth, he knew that it would compromise his family and compromise his mother and really hurt everyone there. And so he chose to do the wrong thing, but it stayed with him. And all of those years later, he eventually did the right thing, but it doesn't make him a bad person because he chose to honor his mother.
Now I'd like to switch the focus to the main characters, Rudy and April. How did you explore the evolution of Rudy and April's bond as childhood best friends whose lives took different paths but remained rooted in unconditional love? And can you give an example of a moment that most tested their bond? And were there real-life inspirations for their friendship?
It wasn't a direct line. I don't have any experience with that. However, I grew up in a community, both a Jewish community and just my block in Queens, that were very formative. My street that I grew up on in Hollis Hills, literally the next door. I was in Hollis. You were oh, neighbor. So my next door neighbor owned the pizza place, Vito's, around the corner, and they had 4 kids. Their daughter married the son of the tailor from the corner across the street. It was like a little shtetl, but a multicultural shtetl. And you have Irish Catholic there, another Irish Catholic, Jewish, Italian, Asian. Russian Jews next to us. It was a phenomenal way to grow up, and all of the kids played together, and everybody looked out for each other. And so that was a big source of inspiration. And we all, in addition to that, I grew up in Hollis Hills Jewish Center, and I was ill as a child, and that was the source of inspiration for my first book. And I really witnessed, having been a sick kid, the way that a community can really rally and be there for you in good times and in bad. And my parents' friends, there were about 10 families that really were just very close. Their children became my friends and my extended family, brothers and sisters to me. And so that relationship and the way the multicultural relationship on my block and then that Jewish community feel from Hollis Hills were inspiring for both my first book, The Cast, as well as this book about how you can have, not a lot of books talk about, a lot of the guys and the girls, if they grow up together, sometimes there's a love interest and something. I wrestled in the beginning of this book whether or not I wanted Rudy and April to end up together, and I decided not to because I really wanted to capture that platonic love, deep love that you can have for somebody as a friend, and the inspiration was the way I grew up.
Thank you. Now, I want to look at April's divided loyalties and Peter's growth. April is walking a tightrope, balancing her lifelong loyalty to Rudy, her responsibilities to her children, who are deeply impacted when her past resurfaces, and her marriage to Peter, at a moment when his political ambitions are at their peak. How did you approach writing April's emotional calculus when every choice carried personal, familial, and public consequences?
It's a good question, but that's just part of the writing process. You have to, find these ripples and where's the friction and the drama. And so there was no, in terms of, you're dealing with a marriage, you're dealing with career, you're dealing with children. It's just, as a working married woman with, a child and friends, and you just sort of tap into those emotions. But that's part of the process.
Peter initially lives a very straight line kind of life. He focused on his campaign and getting elected, and he falls short of his Ferris wheel promise to sit beside April in good times and in bad. Why was it important to show that absence before showing that growth?
I think, it's interesting. A lot of people, if you read the reviews and in a lot of these book events that I do, people don't like Peter. I did not have that reaction when I wrote him. I found Jillian way more annoying. But Peter, I didn't have a problem with. I wanted to show, again, it's the such good people. It's people who are inherently good can have temper tantrums as adults and say things that they don't mean in a moment of crisis and anger, and does that make them a bad person? I mean, that's open to interpretation, but I mean, I personally don't think that it made him a bad person. I think it made him human. You know, you can't always be all good. But well, people have different reactions.
Well, my reaction at first is I was annoyed, I was angry at him. But then I came to understand that when you don't actually ever have to deal with disappointment and you had that kind of straight line kind of life, you don't know how to grapple with it. But he learned. And I appreciated that you showed that you have to start somewhere. And some people face those tragedies early on, and some of them do it later. But we're all people, and we're all going to get there at some point. None of us are unaffected. But I did appreciate that. Now, both sets of parents, I want to switch now to the parents. Both sets of parents were unwavering in their support of Rudy. How did you weave the role of these families into the story, and what does it say about loyalty and community? Did you intentionally highlight family as a moral anchor in the story?
Yes, and that was based on what I said before about using my the community where I grew up as an example. It was very formative for me. I mean, the cast, my first book, was, again, inspired by my story of having Hodgkin's as a kid, but it was really about, it was called The Cast because there was a group of those 10 families, my parents' friends and their kids, who created a videotape called Amy Night Live because they knew that I loved Saturday Night Live. And that was what kept me laughing through my treatment at Sloan Kettering, what kept me through to recovery and a cure, was those people supported me, they supported my parents, they supported my brother, they donated blood. It was the way that in a crisis, a community can really rally and buoy you in these really tough times. That was the inspiration for the cast, and it was the inspiration in part, in addition to my dad, for this book, to see how, you know, in tough times people show up, and the people who really love you are not going to question, they're just going to be there.
Now, I was really impressed with the way that you addressed reentry and PTSD. The novel examines Rudy's reentry into society, as you mentioned, after prison, including PTSD, and his slow process of returning to spaces that trigger memories of incarceration. How did you research this, and what did you want readers to understand? And did you do research into real cases, or did the Innocence Project influence specific scenes?
I did do research. I actually, I have a friend who works with this community. I also spoke with an inmate. Well, he was in prison for 29 years for murder. And he was released, and he's sort of gone back and worked in not a halfway house, but he works with juveniles in Queens to sort of like scare them straight, basically. And so, you know, through conversations with my friend who's a social worker, through conversations with this individual, and through research that I did online and just a lot of reading, I mean, that's where it basically came from.
It was very effective to me, even the physical feelings that he was having when he was experiencing the PTSD. It got me very engaged and made me very sensitive to it, and I really appreciate that. Also, what role do you see such organizations like the Innocence Project in shaping law and public understanding?
I mean, the Innocence Project was actually started with Peter Neufeld and Barry Scheck, and those were people who worked for my dad. My dad was their mentor. So I didn't not consult them on this. This is totally independent of them. But I really admire the work that they do. You know, I've heard about this. It's like it's another one of those things that I've heard in, you know, just in conversations over dinner tables and brunches. And this is the world that Josh and I, my brother and I, grew up in, hearing about all of this. And so I knew that I wasn't going to law school. And this is my way to shine a light on this world and hopefully, you know, make people think twice. You know, it's just important to like look at an entire picture. I also started my career in journalism as a fact checker, and it was really eye-opening to see how many mistakes were made, how many things that I caught and my colleagues caught, and it really, and it's gotten only worse now with the internet and people clickbait, and it's just really think twice. You know, before you spread gossip, before you jump to conclusions, do your homework. You know, take everything that you read with a grain of salt. I know from personal experience, and I know from watching my dad and everything that he's doing, not everything is what you see.
I just say that, you know, everyone here who knows me knows that I don't believe in coincidences. And my son is now at Cardozo Law School, and he went there in large part because he was very, very impressed with the Innocence Project, and he's very interested in criminal defense work. So I was just hysterical when you just told me that. Wait till I get home and tell him. So I wanted to look at some secondary characters. So I wanted to look at Jillian and Dan Sketcher. Jillian evolves from an ambitious young reporter into someone who prioritizes truth over advancement. How did you approach showing that moral growth? And did your experiences or research in journalism influence her character?
Oh, yes. I knew many people like this. Yes, very much. I mean, I understand her drive. At a young age, I had that drive, but not to the point of knocking people down. And other people, I recognize aspects of other people in Jillian. And I also wanted to put in a little bit of a romance. I think she could have done the right thing. I don't think she's an inherently bad person, but I think her drive overrode everything. But I think her jealousy in that moment, the night of the crime, that he was not paying attention. Rudy was not paying attention to her. She had a crush on him. He was not giving her any love. And he was focused on April. She got mad, and then that's why she ratted him out. And that, you know, she felt like, you know, she would have done the right thing, but haha, you know.
Thank you for that insight. Now I want to look at Dan Sketcher, or as I like to call him, Sketchy Sketcher. Okay. He shares parallels with Jillian's early ambition, but he withholds exculpatory evidence to prove himself as a young prosecutor. Unlike Jillian, he never tries to fix the wrong. Was it important to show that some people grow and others remain stagnant? And were there moments when it was difficult to withhold empathy from his character?
I think what you said is true, that some people just don't grow. You know, I think that you pretty much captured it. You know, he had the drive just like Jillian, but Jillian had an arc. Jillian grew, she changed, she could see all sides of it, he couldn't.
So he was focused more on himself rather than others, and she was able to grow to include others. Yeah, that was beautiful. Now, there was also some other tertiary characters I liked. Mr. Marino and Bunny. Mr. Marino and Bunny are two characters who believe in Rudy before, during, and after his incarceration. Their faith in him never wavers, even in the darkest moments. Can you talk about the role these believers play in Rudy's survival and growth, and why it's so essential in life, as well as in this novel, for people to have someone who sees their worth when they may not be able to see it for themselves. And what do you hope readers take away about the responsibility and power we all have to be that person for someone else?
I think it's a matter of just believing in that person, even if they make a mistake, even if there's something questionable that's going on with them, to have people in your corner to really stand up and be there to support you no matter what. It's not unconditional love, but it's just being there. It's just having that support system. And so I wanted Bunny Fishbein to say, I love you anyway. Here, I'm going to send you some books. Go, don't forget I'm here for you. And so to have that, I wanted to show that he had that. I also, I don't know, I think it's just important to have people to come home to and to know that there's something to live for. And so I wanted to show that he had a community to come back to. It's not just, and that was part of the struggle with April too, is that I wanted her to feel like, how can I abandon him? And I have built this beautiful family, but look what he gave up for me. How could I just not be there when he returns?
So there's a lot of moral complexity. Many characters make complex choices. How do you balance empathy for them while still allowing their flaws to create tension? And were there characters whose decisions challenged you most as a writer?
I think Jillian was the most complex character, but I think my favorite was Keith. Keith was a minor character, but he was, as I mentioned earlier, he was the brother, and he was wrestling with honoring his mother versus doing the right thing. And what was your question again? I was thinking about it, but.
How do you balance empathy for them while you're writing them?
I sort of try to put myself in their shoes, and that was one of the reasons I like to write both books from different perspectives. And I go back again to growing up in my home, and at our table, my aunt was a prosecutor, my father was a defense attorney. And so it's like there's this devil's advocate in every corner. And so you have to think about everything from a different perspective. And so I wrote both of my books in this way so that you could really try to see, from all sides of everything. And I think that's really important just in general in life, to really take everything into consideration. And so that was how I tried to feel what would to have the empathy for all of them and to feel from their lived perspective, and just take everything into consideration.
Now, although the novel isn't explicitly Jewish, how did your upbringing and community experiences influence the moral landscape of the book? Which Jewish values shaped characters' decisions around loyalty, justice, and truth? And also, was it a deliberate choice not to explicitly identify the characters as Jewish, even as those values quietly inform the story? And if so, what guided that decision?
Well, in our home, we had a painting on the living room wall with Tzedek, Tzedek Tirdof. And so I tried to use that as another source of inspiration. Justice, justice shall you pursue. And so that was very much a part of this. Also, as I mentioned earlier, Keith, it's honoring your parents, and how do you, the fallout from honoring your parents, even though they did something wrong. Judaism is, I went to Schechter. I grew up in Hollis Hills. I've kept a kosher home my whole life. I went to Hebrew University, Jerusalem, for my junior year of college. I was at a counselor camp Ramah in Nyack. I mean, it's very much a part of my fabric. And so my first book, The Cast, definitely dealt with some Jewish issues. There were Orthodox characters. There was an intermarriage. It's how do you raise a family with an intermarriage. So I wanted to sort of veer away a little bit from that in this book, and I wanted to have like a nod to Judaism, but not make all of the characters Jewish. I think it's interesting, given October 7th, and I was part of the Zibby Owens book, the anthology on being Jewish now, and I think a lot of my author friends and I, we've said that we may, incorporate more Judaism into our next books just as a result of that. So in that way, I think October 7th has sort of impacted my decision to add a little bit more Judaism into the next book. But I wanted to have some Judaism, but not overwhelming.
I just want to know, did these characters change you?
That's an interesting question. I've not been asked that question before. I love all of these characters. I love all of the characters that I've created for both books because they become your imaginary friends. I mean, I sit there in my home with my sweatpants and a bun on my head and my glasses and a cup of tea or coffee, depending on the day. And it's quiet and no one's talking to me. And I sit there and I come up with these the stories and the characters, and they become real people. And people ask me all the time about my process, and are you a plotter or a pantser? And meaning, do you fly by the seat of your pants and just write, or do you plot everything out? And my answer typically is that I'm a combination of both. And so I can plot out, have like a blueprint for how this is going to work, and then ultimately I'll sit down to write it, and the characters start to speak to me, and I know I sound insane. However, this is the way it works, is that they take on a life of their own, and they will guide the book once they are created. So they definitely stay with me. They're my imaginary friends.
Okay, so before we open the conversation to questions from the audience, Amy, is there a final message you hope readers take away from Rudy and April's relationship, Peter's growth, Jillian's journey, Dan Sketcher's moral arc, or the story as a whole? Is there a message you hope resonates, especially with families or communities, and any possibility of a sequel?
I don't think there's going to be a sequel, but thank you, though. In terms of a message, one of the questions that I'm often asked is, how do you come up with the names of your characters? And sometimes it's like a wink and a nod to my niece or my nephew's dog, or just for fun, for a minor character. But Rudy, actually, there's a meaning behind Rudy's name. And when my dad was in law school, he went to GW Law School, and he was living in the dorm his first week of his first year. And then he noticed on the bulletin board there was a sign there was a job posting, free room and board if you take a job at the DC jail. So he moved out of his dorm and he went to the DC jail, and he lived in the officers' quarters there, and he was interviewing inmates. And he knew that he wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer, and so he figured this would be a really great 360 view of the process. So he took that job, and as part of living there, he interviewed a man named Hollicott Bradley. And Hollicott Bradley is a phenomenal name, and I used that name as the man who was recently released in the book. And while my dad was meeting with Hollicott Bradley and getting to know him, Hollicott Bradley came in one day, and he had a photocopy of a poem, and it was the If poem by Rudyard Kipling. And so he wanted to study it with my dad. And that's where I got the inspiration for that scene in the book where Hollicott Bradley comes in and studies it with April. And Rudy is named Rudy for Rudyard Kipling because of the If poem, which is all about keeping your chin up during difficult times and being a man, my son. And, it's about the mile. It's having that strength to persevere. And so if there were messages that I would hope that my readers would take from this, is that you have to persevere, keep your chin up during difficult times, and also for the readers to not believe everything they read and they see, and to do your homework, and to look at all sides of everything, and don't make assumptions, and don't gossip until you really know the facts.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's it. questions. We're able to take questions? Yes. Please step up to the mic so everyone can hear, including those watching from afar.
TV. Hello, my name is Roz Lansman.
We can't hear you. Hold on.
Hi.
The mic's not working well.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, my name is Roz Lansman. And is that better? Okay. I enjoyed your book very much. And I forgot the lead character. What's her name? April. Thank you. Did April go to Cornell? No. Because I was thinking of an upstate school that far. Oh.
I looked it up too. I said,
No, it doesn't, no.
Oh. Anyway,
First Street and the Lower East Side, no, it's amazing.
anyway, the mother who changed April's life, the mother who had her kicked out of school, the mother of the dead boy. Nothing was said about her afterwards. When her son's murderer came out of prison, and then she realized or found out that it was her son that opened everything up. I thought that there would have been some repercussions because she was such a strong woman. And I was just surprised at that. Was there any talk about that?
I want to give it back to you. We only have one working mic.
There were some things that I left open-ended on purpose. And so when you write, contemporary fiction for book clubs, a lot of things are left open so that there are conversations. That was one of them. So I'm glad you picked up on that. Yes. So these are things, and I mean, there have been times people have come up to me and said, can you just tell me what happens with Rudy and why he didn't ask for more money? Did he end up getting millions of dollars? And I was like, you tell me. What do you think? So what would happen with a mother? What would she have her, would people cover her in the news about what happened given that her son exposed her? I mean, these are all things that people could talk about in a book club.
And I thought Jillian, I didn't like Jillian in the beginning. She was
Yeah,
pushy.
nobody did.
And so many of us knew so many of them. But she did good
Right.
at the end. She worked everything out.
Right. That was the hardest arc. That was the hardest character for me to write because I knew people would find her incredibly annoying because I did in the beginning. It was kind of fun to write somebody who was really annoying. But then I had to make her likable by the end.
Yes.
And so that was that was like the most challenging one to write.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for reading.
I had another question, since you're not writing a sequel. My question is, when Tommy and Jillian start to date, I don't think Tommy or anybody really knows that Jillian was the one who started the whole thing. What will happen when everybody finds out? And will they? That's why I need the sequel. Can you come up? We can't do that because we have people on line.
Are there talks of a movie?
Hold on.
From your mouth to God's ears. I do have somebody who represents me and has spoken to somebody, but it's so in the early stages that I'm not holding my breath, but I would love to have that happen. But yes, there is a little bit of motion, but like this much. So there is representation, there is a conversation, but I don't know where it's going to go. But I'm not holding my breath for it.
Well, thank you very much. Is it time to move into the outside? We're going to sell books. Oh, we have another question. Okay. Okay.
I know how to use a mic. Strangely enough, I I was just wondering, in the process of writing this book, did and seeing how, you know, you grew up on both sides, not on both sides of the law, but on both sides of the legal process that we have, if writing this book and exploring these different characters within a legal context and a social context and everything, has that changed how you view law and law's place in society and in the world?
That's a good question. It does. I think in the process of researching and writing this, I have a lot of, in addition to my dad, my brother's an attorney, I'm very close with my cousin, who's a prosecutor in the Manhattan DA's office. My aunt was a prosecutor in Brooklyn. So I had enough people in my family to sort of talk to about their own experiences and, the New York Penal Code, which I have in my texts, so I got to study it a little bit and hear from their own personal experiences. And I was very surprised because some readers have come up to me and said, well, this is not realistic. Like, a good lawyer would never do this. A defense attorney would go to bat better than this, would stand up, would have waited for the medical examiner's report. A prosecutor would never behave like this. And I say to them, yeah, a good lawyer would not do that. And so by speaking to my family members and hearing their stories over, decades, not everyone's amazing. Not everybody is a mensch. And I think I was surprised to hear that because I think, you expect people to have the morals and the values that you are raised with or that you have been exposed to, as particularly in a Jewish community. And I was quite surprised to hear from the stories that, my family members have shared that, their friends are up to snuff, but not everybody they have worked with is like that. And I felt, important to share that aspect of it with readers because, and it was proof to me when people came up to me and are like, nobody would ever do this. Yeah, it happens. It happens. That's why it's important to have good people, out there doing various things, whether it's a fact checker, a reporter, having a moral compass inside of them, and an attorney to represent you. And another thing is that when you think about Rudy, if one of us, chances are, if we were in that, God forbid, in his position, we would know people through a connection, through somebody, a friend, a family member, who would find the right person. But, not everybody has that gift of connection and community. And that was another thing that I, subtly wanted to bring up. And we're blessed in a way to be a part of a community and a culture where we have that. And some, obviously people do, but not everybody does. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, please join us outside and continue the conversation.